Support for this podcast comes from the Central Valley Journalism Collaborative, connecting communities with the resources, infrastructure, and networks to ensure a vibrant local free press.
From KVPR in Fresno, this is Central Valley Daily. It's Tuesday, September 24th. I'm Elizabeth Arkalian. The Burrell Fire was the largest in Kern County's history. It burned more than 60,000 acres and consumed the historic town of Havilah earlier this summer.
It created almost a blowtorch, and it was just pointed right at this valley.
Coming up in just a few minutes, hear how residents are grappling with an uncertain recovery. But first, today's headlines. As a new ordinance to tackle homeless camping goes into effect in the City of Fresno, officials unveiled a new program to help those who may still fall behind. The city on Monday unveiled its, quote, Treatment First program, aimed at putting the focus of dealing with unhoused people on treating rather than jailing them. City Council member Tyler Maxwell says roughly $500 million have been spent in responding to homelessness in the last 4 years, a problem he says affects about 1% of the city's overall population.
I would reckon that's a bigger investment than we've made into any other local population, and understandably so, given how difficult homelessness can be to overcome.
The new city policy instructs police to provide treatment options for repeat offenders and withhold a police record as an incentive, unless that person opts out of treatment. A new hunger strike has been launched by detainees at 2 ICE detention centers in the state. At least 80 people joined in the strike at the Golden State Annex facility in McFarland and at the ICE facility in Adelanto. Detainees are protesting alleged abuse against ICE officials and prison operators. This is at least the third hunger strike in recent years by detainees. Advocates have pushed for their release and the closure of the centers through lawsuits and civil rights complaints. A retired Fresno County judge was indicted by a grand jury on Monday. KVPR's Crescencio Rodriguez Delgado has details from the charges that were unsealed in court.
Retired Judge Adolfo Corona is being accused of sexual assault involving alleged force and battery. Details of the incident that led up to the charges were not revealed, but the charges were unsealed in a courtroom overseen by a retired Tulare County judge. It's a rare indictment of a judge in Fresno County, either retired or sitting. Corona is 65 years old. He was appointed judge in 2003 and retired in April. He pleaded not guilty to the charges, and a trial date is tentatively set for January. If found guilty, he faces a max sentence of 8 years in prison. For KVPR News, I'm Crescencio Rodriguez Delgado.
A trio of men think they have found the largest pine tree in the world, standing in Yosemite National Park. In a news report from the Tahoe Daily Tribune, the men, who call themselves big tree hunters, recount how they came to find the tree on a trip to Yosemite in August. They say they estimate the volume of a particular sugar pine tree to be 5,761 cubic feet. That's slightly larger than the current record holder, a ponderosa pine with a volume of 5,450 cubic feet. That one can be found in the Rogue River Siskiyou National Forest in Oregon. It's unclear what the process will be to officially declare the tree in Yosemite as the largest.
Support for Central Valley Daily comes from the members of KVPR. Join at $8 or more per month and access ad-free NPR podcasts through NPR Plus. Give now at kvpr.org/donate.
And now to our main story. The Burrell Fire was the largest wildfire in Kern County's history. It tore through 60,000 acres in the southern Sierra Nevada and consumed the historic town of Havilah earlier this summer. State crews have only just begun cleanup efforts as those displaced reckon with the carnage. KVPR's Joshua Yeager takes us to the burned-up ghost town, where residents have rallied around an unlikely icon.
On the only road into Havilah, just before you reach town, a solitary bull clings to life, its underside blistered and scorched. His name is Curly, and he's greeted nearly every Havilah resident since a massive wildfire tore through the town.
He is the mascot for the Burrell Fire.
Mark Carruthers is Curly's owner. He said the fire reduced the town almost entirely to rubble in a matter of hours.
According to our neighbors who left after we did, they witnessed about a 100-foot tall fire tornado ripping through here.
His small ranch, century-old home, and workshop were all incinerated.
This is the metal roofing from the house. that just caved in.
More than 200 structures were destroyed, according to a Kern County fire assessment. That's most of the town. And some 2 months later, many homes remain without water or electricity. But Curly, he says, is still hanging in there.
There were 3 times, literally, that we were like, okay, we're coming back at this time to put him down. And all 3 times, he was standing again, back on his feet, just like, not today.
Those words, not today, have also become a rallying cry for Havilah as the town grapples with a lengthy and uncertain recovery. Even though FEMA helped pay for the firefighting effort, the agency is unlikely to assist homeowners. And after the state helps clean up hazardous waste and debris, displaced residents are essentially on their own. That's why local nonprofits have stepped in to help them with their immediate needs.
That can be anything from shelter to medicine to, air conditioning if it's hot or heat if it's cold.
Aaron Falk is president of the Kern Community Foundation and says they've helped disperse more than $30,000 in financial assistance so far.
Because we're Kern County and we get earthquakes and fires and flooding, we've over the 25 years, we've built up a few pretty good endowments to respond to natural disasters.
While Falk says he'd like to give more, they have to save some funds in case the fall brings heavy rains, which could cause landslides and more damage.
It would be cool if we didn't have to have existing funds for disaster relief that we frequently use. But to quote, I think Forrest Gump, happens, and we've got to be here for each other.
And it did happen. When triple-digit heat, bone-dry conditions, and Santa Ana winds all pushed the Borel fire toward Havilah.
It created almost a blowtorch, and it was just pointed right at this valley.
Andrew Freeborn is a Kern County fire captain. He says his department is concerned that the extreme conditions they saw on the Borel fire are becoming increasingly common across the county and Sierra Nevada.
We have continued to see fire after fire, large fires, destructive fires, and because of that, 2024 is going down as the most acres burned in Kern County's history.
As if to underscore the point, during our interview, an alarm sounded on Freeborn's radio.
I might have to leave.
The firefighter and his team got whisked away. Another fire had broken out just outside the Borel fire line. For KVPR News, I'm Joshua Yeager in Havilah.
And KVPR's Joshua Yeager joins me now to discuss his piece a little further. Hi, Joshua.
Hey, Liz.
So, have you heard how long recovery might take in Havilah and whether there are possibly people who may never end up moving back into town?
Yeah, well, from what I've heard in my reporting so far, that answer is very uncertain. I mean, a lot of people in this area didn't have fire insurance, for example, because it's really expensive to insure homes in these fire-prone areas. And a lot of people who live up there, they've been there for generations. They're maybe living in a mobile home or a trailer. They maybe don't have a lot of resources to be able to rebuild. And so that's definitely been a concern as the community sort of considers its future. Federal FEMA funding for homeowners to help rebuild, as has happened in some other large wildfires that we've seen, that's not likely to come here short of a presidential proclamation. Some people I've talked to be clear, have definitely told me they plan to rebuild regardless of what funding does or does not come through, but others are definitely in a much more precarious situation.
Your story opens with this description of Curly the bull, who has been harmed in the fire. Out of curiosity, was there a reason he couldn't get out of town? Did the owner have nowhere to take him?
Well, the reason was, he was so badly burned and injured that he just doesn't have the strength really to move or to be, loaded up or potentially transported. He's been receiving veterinarian care. Mark Crothers, his owner, and others have helped to, feed and care for him and bring him water and all that stuff. But my understanding is he and I'm not a veterinarian, but my understanding is he basically just didn't have the strength at that point to be able to pick himself up and move, substantial distances. So he's been hanging out on the side of this main road into town for a couple of months as he recovers. Mark was telling me that his owner was telling me that, he'd get calls from people driving down the road because they saw this big bull just kind of laying there and feared he was dead. But, Mark has reassured me that he's still alive. He's improving every day is what I've heard. So Hang in there, Curly.
Yeah, kind of a sad reminder of what's happened to that community. So you mentioned there's been limited support in different capacities coming to the community. What do you think the future holds for Havilah?
Right. Well, as I said, I think it's very uncertain. I mean, I think there's just a lot of questions right now. People's burned up houses still haven't been cleared. The rubble's still there. If they want to get assistance from the state to clean that up, they are not supposed to even look for their belongings in the rubble. They're not supposed to disturb it in any way. Otherwise, that could disqualify them from receiving state funding to do that cleanup work. So you might be able to imagine if your house had burned down and you weren't even able to clean it up, you haven't even gotten word if you're allowed to rebuild yet. That raises a lot of questions about whether people are going to want to stick through that process as all of the sort of details are worked out. I've also heard that there's a risk of landslides, and kind of touched on that in the piece, but this fall, if there's a very decent chance that a normal-ish rainstorm could come and sort of wash a lot of the burned up debris down along that main road, that main drag of Havilah, and that could just exacerbate damages and the cleanup process. Hopefully that doesn't happen, of course, but it's a possibility based on some of the preliminary science that has been done by the Forest Service in that area.
Yeah, I'm sure this is something to keep an eye on and something you'll stay on top of. That was KVPR's Joshua Yeager. Thanks so much for joining me, Josh.
Thank you, Liz.
And that does it for today's episode. Thank you for listening. If you have feedback on today's show or a story idea, we would love to hear from you. Email us at podcast@kvpr.org. Today's episode was produced by Jonathan Linden and KVPR with support from the Central Valley Journalism Collaborative. I'm Elizabeth Arkalian. Find the latest local news anytime at kvpr.org.